In this apocalyptic world overrun by zombies, humans are few and far between. Food is scarce, and trust between people has nearly disappeared. Andy and his family had been surviving on a boat for 2.5 months. While the boat kept them relatively safe, finding enough food remained a constant challenge. One day, Andy spotted an abandoned yacht. Hoping to find supplies, he carefully approached, using a mirror to check for danger. Seeing nothing unusual, he entered the cabin and was relieved to find plenty of food, enough to sustain them for months. Feeling triumphant, Andy gathered a box of supplies and returned to his boat. Unaware that his wife Kay had taken a risk of her own. While Andy slept, Kay had secretly gone to the yacht, intending to help her husband gather more food. But a noise startled her, and she tried to leave, only to be too late. Andy woke to the sound of his daughter crying. Carrying her, he noticed a puddle of blood on the floor. A sense of dread washed over him as he opened the bathroom door and found his wife tending to a bite wound. Kay then revealed a countdown bracelet. Only 48 hours remained before she would turn into a zombie. Andy didn't panic. Following a government-issued map, he quickly packed a bag. The map marked 8 stations on land, and one of them might hold a cure. Without delay, the family set out, aware that land was far more dangerous than the open water. Soon, they found a car. As Andy filled the tank, Kay spotted a zombie approaching. She wanted to warn him, but feared making a sound. Instead, she turned on the car's turn signal. Andy understood instantly. Just as the zombie lunged, he jumped into the car, and they drove away. But their relief was short-lived. Kay noticed her wound was now covered in zombie blood, a clear sign she was close to turning. Terrified she might harm her family, she tried to leave the car. Andy, seeing her struggle, had to stop and catch up with her. Kay knew her end was near. Andy knew there was no cure for Kay, but he refused to give up. He forced her back into the car, making sure she couldn't harm herself or escape. With grim determination, he drove on toward their destination. But fate wasn't done with them. A zombie suddenly appeared in the middle of the road. Andy swerved instinctively, only to collide with a tree branch. The impact was brutal. Kay was impaled in the abdomen, and Andy was knocked unconscious. When he awoke, panic gripped him. Written across the car door were words he couldn't ignore, and Kay's face was covered in zombie blood. Within moments, she had fully mutated. In trying to comfort his terrified daughter, Andy was bitten by Kay in her new, monstrous form. With no other choice, he had to send his wife on her final journey, the last act of love in a world gone mad. Afterward, Andy collapsed in despair, screaming out his grief and anger. He thought about giving up, about joining Kay in death. But his daughter, only months old, needed him. He couldn't let her die too. Determined, Andy removed the countdown bracelet from Kay's wrist and put it on his own hand. He adjusted the 48-hour countdown and prepared for what lay ahead. Carrying his daughter on his back, he pressed onward. To calm her, he sprayed the air with Kay's former perfume. The familiar scent soothed the baby, and her cries stopped. At that moment, Andy spotted the very zombie responsible for their car accident. He reached for a branch, ready to confront it, knowing that survival meant he couldn't hesitate. Suddenly, Thalmy stopped him. The sharp stone-cut palm, she signaled him to wait. The zombies smelled blood immediately, drawn to the scent. Doomy stayed close, a different kind of protector keeping her loved ones near, no matter the danger. Andy pressed on, following the map toward the 8th station. Finally, after a long, dark journey, he reached his destination. But it wasn't what he expected. The place was dim and empty, showing no signs of life. As he looked around, he spotted Etta sitting in a corner. She noticed the wound on Andy's arm and applied a simple bandage. "This isn't an aid station anymore," she explained. The virus had spread so fast that the government had long abandoned this place. Andy had considered entrusting his daughter to her care, But then he saw Etta remove her wig. She was medicated, battling an incurable disease. Seeing this, Andy realized it wasn't possible and abandoned the idea. The next morning, he said goodbye to Etta and continued his journey with his daughter on his back. Along the way, he saw many zombies with their heads buried in the dirt. As soon as he passed, the creatures stirred awake, forcing him to stay alert. Soon, Andy spotted a truck. He hoped he could drive it, but the owner, a zombie, was nearby. Gunfire suddenly rang out, drawing more zombies. Vic, trapped in a pit, called for help. Andy retrieved Vic's car keys and rushed to save him. With Vic in tow, he floored the gas pedal and escaped just as the horde arrived. Vic led Andy to a gas station where he and his wife lived. The two had a good rapport, and Vic's first act was to give Lorraine a necklace he had found. But Andy knew that, in this world, such gestures were only surface-level comforts. Vic turned away, and Lorraine frowned in disgust, tossing the necklace aside. Andy didn't understand what was going on, so he sat quietly to rest. Later, Vic invited him out, and Andy, having no choice, left his daughter with Lorraine. Vic took Andy to practice shooting. Ahead of them, dozens of zombies were gathered around a large metal cage, drawn by something inside. Under Vic's instruction, Andy shot them down one by one. When the last one fell, he stepped closer and froze. Inside the cage was Thalmy, the woman he had met before. Shock turned to anger. Andy realized Vic and Lorraine weren't what they seemed. They were using human lives for sport. These were not people he could trust with his daughter's safety. Back at the gas station, Lorraine was caring for the baby when she noticed a trace of zombie blood on Andy's belongings. She understood immediately, but said nothing. Quietly, she washed the baby's clothes and hung them to dry. When Andy returned, he saw what she'd done and realized she knew he was infected. Unlike Vic, Lorraine showed compassion. For the first time, Andy thought maybe, just maybe, he could entrust his daughter to her. That night, time was slipping away. Andy knew the infection was spreading fast. After a long, painful goodbye to his daughter, he walked out into the night, holding the government-issued injector meant to end his life before he turned. Just as he was about to do it, Lorraine appeared, carrying his daughter. She knew exactly what he planned. When Andy begged her to take care of the baby, she shook her head. "I can't," she said softly. Then came the truth. She and Vic were not a couple. Vic had murdered her husband. "If you really want your daughter to live," she told him, "get her away from here." Lorraine's words hit him hard. Remembering Vic's cruel actions during the day, Andy's doubts turned to certainty. He couldn't die here. Somewhere out there was a family he had once met by the river, a family with 2 daughters. Maybe they could help. And so, Andy decided to set out again, holding his child close, determined to reach the one last hope he had left. But as soon as he mentioned the family, Vic suddenly appeared and struck Andy on the head. When he awoke, he found himself locked in a cage with Thalmy. Time was running out. He could feel the infection spreading, and the zombies were closing in fast. Glancing at the fat sausage hanging from the cage, Andy hatched a plan. He tied it to a rope and swung it toward the front. The zombies, drawn by the scent, lunged for it. Using the distraction, Andy and Thalmy managed to pry open the iron door and escape. They made their way to the gas station, carefully sneaking into the room where Lorraine slept. They picked up the baby and prepared to leave. Vic, sleeping like a pig, didn't notice. They quietly slipped out, but just as they reached the car, Vic appeared with a shotgun. Lorraine tried to stop him, but he shot her as she reached out. Panic surged through Andy. Vic pursued them relentlessly, so they ran and hid in a nearby cave, finally shaking him off. They waited in silence until dawn, but even in the safety of the cave, danger lingered. Thalmy woke to a strange sound, and shone her flashlight. Andy was on the verge of losing himself to the virus. Licking blood off the stone walls, his humanity slipping. By morning, he regained control, and with his daughter and Thalmy, they continued their journey. Under the shadow of a tree, Thaumi stopped. It was a place where her father had been killed and buried by the zombie clan. She knelt, saying a quiet prayer, honoring him before pressing on. Hours later, Andy felt his body betray him. 9 hours remained before full transformation. After a painful struggle, he collapsed into a coma. When he awoke, he clutched his daughter and pressed on, determined to reach the family he had once met. Finally, he found them, but horror awaited. The man was digging a grave, and Andy realized too late that a zombie had bitten him. He had hoped to entrust his daughter to them, but fate had other plans. The man urged Andy to take his daughter far from this dangerous world and promised to lead them with 2 bullets for protection. Without hesitation, he turned and left. Soon after, the sharp report of gunfire pierced the air. Andy watched in horror as the man first killed his own wife and daughter, then took his own life. Andy picked up the man's pistol, frozen and despairing, ready to end his own life, but his daughter's cries made him pause. The sound of her small voice pulled him back from the brink. Carrying his daughter, Andy was guided by Thaumi, who warned him that her clan wasn't far. Her words gave him renewed hope. If he could bring his daughter to their tribe, she would have a chance at safety. Without hesitation, Andy agreed, and they set off immediately. As they passed through a cave, they saw countless zombies huddled in the darkness. Thaumi explained they were sleeping, they favored dark places, like graves, and disturbing them could be deadly. Carefully, they moved through the tunnel, but then Vic appeared. Slowly, he walked toward them, trying to draw attention. Andy and Thaumi barely had time to react. Vic fought off zombies to reach them, and Andy, desperate, tried to shoot him but missed. Vic struck him down, and before doing anything to the children, he pulled Thaumi down and took Andy's daughter. To Andy's shock, Vic, gravely wounded from a previous gunshot, spared the girl in his final moments. Thaumi, dazed from a head injury, and Andy, weakening under the virus's effects, pressed on. Andy held on to his sanity as long as he could, supporting his daughter and moving forward. Eventually, he could go no further. He tied a small carcass to a branch as a distraction, entrusted his daughter to Thaumi's care, and prepared himself. With his hands bound and mouth braced to prevent harm, Andy succumbed to the virus, turning into a zombie. Yet even as a monster, he instinctively fought off other zombies to protect his daughter. Then came a miracle. The mist parted, revealing a strange undead figure carrying his daughter. Guided by his own rotting flesh, Andy completed his final mission as a father. He delivered his daughter safely to the tribe. In the aftermath, the tribe welcomed her with love. Among their belongings, a small note was found hidden on her, a final message from Andy, expressing his eternal love for his daughter and gratitude to the clan who had taken her in. Friends, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay with us.